Hi, welcome to UCR Writers Week 2023. We're thrilled to have you join us today. Just as a few helpful notes in case you've never attended an event on Crowdcast before, when it's time for our Q&A segment, please submit your questions using the Q&A feature, not the chat. Let's give it a minute or two for everyone to join the session. And as we're waiting, please let me know in the chat where you're listening from today. Right. Oh, and let us know if this is your first time you've attended UCR Writers Week. All right. Yep, I'm seeing Riverside. That's awesome. That's where we are here too, obviously, now that I'm realizing that. Yeah, well, welcome. I'm seeing a first timer. That's amazing. Welcome. Another Riverside. Oh, North Carolina. Very cool. All right. Well, seems like everyone's here. Let's get started.
Welcome to the 46th Writers Week at UCR. 46 years of incredible literary presence. We at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Kuia, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many Indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. Further, we offer acknowledgement to the Asian, Latino, and African American communities who have also built and tended to this city and its surroundings, oftentimes displaced and disenfranchised, despite their labor and commitment to the area. It is our third year online, and we couldn't be more thrilled than to offer captions and ASL interpreters throughout our sessions. And this year we have some on-campus, in-person events for those close enough to attend. We hope that you attend many events this week and spread the news that we are presenting these 33 writers free of charge to all. Pre-registration for virtual events is required, so spread the links as you spread the news. All of the books are available through UCR, Barnes & Noble, and Cellar Door Books online. Please support our authors by buying their books. And following each reading, please stick around for our live Q&A session. With no further ado, we welcome and greatly appreciate everyone here attending this 46th UCR Writers Week Festival. All of our writers presenting, all of our volunteer panel moderators, ASL presenters, and everyone who tunes into these recordings in the post-festival virtual continuum, and to everyone here attending now, welcome to the 46th UCR Writers Week Festival.
Welcome. I'm Forrest Nunley, Chair of the Department of Black Study here at UCR, and I'm glad to be here and glad that you're here. For our first session today, we're being joined by Nathaniel Mackey, No'u Revilla, and Abigail Chabitnoy. Abigail Chabitnoy is the author of In the Current Where the Drowning is Beautiful by Wesleyan Press 2022, and How to Dress the Fish, Wesleyan Press 2019, which was shortlisted for the 2020 International Griffin Prize for Poetry, and winner of the 2020 Colorado Book Award. And finally, the Linnacut Illustrated Chapbook, Converging Lines of Light, Flower Press 2021. She currently teaches at the Institute of American Indian Arts Low Residency MFA program and is an assistant professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Abigail is a member of the Tanganyika native village in Kodiak. And I find this fascinating. And you can find her at salmonfisherpoet.com. No'u Revilla is an Awi poet and educator. Born and raised with the Lili'uokalani brain of the Waihihu on the island of Maui, she currently lives with the Lili'uokalani brain of Palolo on Oahu. Her debut book of poetry, Ask the Brindled, Milkweed Edition 2022, won the 2021 National Poetry Series. Finally, Nathaniel Mackey is the author of numerous books and chapbooks of poetry, most recently, Double Trio, New Directions 2021, and an ongoing prose work, From a Broken Bottle, Traces of Perfume Still Emanate, whose fifth and most recent volume is Late Arcade by New Directions Press 2017, and two books of criticism, the most recent of which is Paracritical Hinge, Essays, Talks, Notes, and Interviews by the University of Wisconsin Press, 2005. She is the editor of the literary magazine Hambaum and co-editor with Art Lang of the anthology of Moments Notice, Jazz and Poetry and Prose, Coffee House Press. He teaches at Duke University. So welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Nathaniel Mackey. I'm going to read an installment from my ongoing serial poem, Song of the Andumbulu. This is section 344. It's a section in 5 parts. And this is actually my most recently published poem. It appeared in the recent issue of Conjunctions Journal, the Onward issue, which is number 79 of Conjunctions. Song of the Andumbulu, 344. Where were we now, and where were we next were the questions. Time's inquisitorial temper nonstop, the what is of it ever unstill. Lightning ran down our legs, where we now came to. Hamstrings, calves, and the hollows behind our ankles. Low-grade lightning, but lightning. Lightning enough, our legs were broken glass. The place we would find was named after. A new traffic occupied every nerve. Usman's guitar filigree was the one familiarity, a carcanet we wound around our necks. It was there, but not there.
Welcome to the 46th Writers' Week at UCR. 46 years of incredible literary presence. We at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and
bodily compliment, bodily gift. I felt my own leg freed of some obstacle, albeit athwart the new air it now met. Weight wasn't what it was, but an efflorescence that took weight's place. I gave Dajali a glance. Her legs likewise flowered, I felt I could see. She answered yes when I asked outright, whereupon, looking around, we saw it was true of each and all of us. That a theretofore givenness accorded it all was what weight had been, was true and seen by all to be true as well. A decanting of afters protocols abreast an emerging order of things. So went the creaking of the whir, a wisecrack, Itamar explained, a word gotten in edgewise. After flirted with altar we saw, an adjacent space it was we were in, a consecrated space. After flirted with altar. The flipping of the switch between letters grew cicada loud. Pain was a penny from heaven, an inebriate release whose decanting was only another such we attended, an afterlife whose edge we were always on. These were the moves one made in one's head, moving on. The gates of the lambent city jumped or ajar. These were the moves we knew, knowing our sad lot. Our sad lot said as much. The beauty of one or another faltering body, the ratcheting up. Our legs were powdered glass. It was the demiurge's fault, we knew, and we fought back with quizzicals morphing our stride. Where was it now, and where was it next, we kept asking and looking to see. Something said, never something seems equal, each its own forfeit, either way. So it was devilish to ask, devilish not to. A dervishness ran between, a Sufi aside. Wherever it was, and everywhere we were, it was a place of disappointment. No one knew who we were. No one knew we were coming. All the same, whether we came or not. Tabula what say? Where we were now and where we were next, our survivors retraced our tracks, all of it as called for by custom, where we'd been, erasing both. Newly appointed, newly apparitional, infinitesimally sanded down, the raw wood of it impervious to paint, multiple coats, no matter, would such else we'd be. So went the riddle Huff made of it. Huff, the syntactic high priest, reliably. Huff had we'd so long known him to be. This as disaster all over the toll you told us halt. Soul catcher glass with us in its crosshairs. Guns going off everywhere. Told us run. An episodic eclipse. An episodic epiphany. Our closer walk, our close brush with lake supremacy ran on. One step at a time we'd been taught, and we now remembered. Wherever it was we were, where our feet were. Guns and ghost guns followed us. Manic slaughter, Nub's pastime now. We'd have gladly called it a path, had it been that. Gladly called it a way, a track or a trail. I plucked my head out from in between my shoulders and dribbled it the rest of our walk. What good was thought, this was a way of asking. Thinking, though asking was. Thinking, though one went on with anyway. Paint was all over us, color, the say of one's own selves, quilt and camouflage. A second skin come, some said, from the sky. We were all in different states of disarray. Sophia complained a crab's claw tugged on her spine. Pastel was all over us, cover. We wore newly appointed bodies cloaked in talcum, an infinitely fine powder, so refined we disappeared. Where we were was the blow-away dust we'd eventually be. The where nows, what next, nullified. Month after month, mile after mile, pointless travel, to the lifted eye and to the knowing brow and to the chorus of ascertainment. A bad time come across Nub and across the world. All blessing accruing to danger. Utopic first responders it would bring. Song 344 said so of itself. All of it gotten to where name was all number. 344, the toll truth took. Song 344 said of itself. Song 2 times 172. Said in turn, song 86 times 2 squared. The ongoing tally, parsing what now, and what next, serenading us in our sleep. No sooner that than the birds woke us with row thrown into lake supremacy. Bad news we'd seen coming, but lay hit by on the floor. Fallen out of bed, knocked out of bed by what before. What the fuck, I lay there asking, taught by Ed and Fred how to cuss. What the fuck, as if taken by surprise. Everyone was saying it everywhere, warned beforehand but on the floor like me. Song 1032 divided by 3, come down to that. It was with us whenever we lay, wherever we lay. With us whenever we sat, wherever we sat. With us whenever we stood, wherever we stood. What the fuck, diffusing the air, a new climb back to what before. The decanting of after had it so. The suffused airs finished going down. It was only one of infinite possible worlds, we reminded ourselves. Many possible ways to what next. Reflecting as its bite went grisly. What the fuck? So dental it bled. The decanting of after had us poured out on the floor, a kind of paint taken in the aggregate, a decanting, the more thought one gave it, of before, doubling back and doubling down. Or it was a decanting of both after and before, post 1/6's ovens that had been lakes, burning both ways. The quizzicals morphing our stride made us take it in stride. All of it only just like so. Another page in the book of so. The book as much box as book. A box the birds flocked inside. It was a box with no walls, the birds asserted. A box with no outside. The book of so's covers, absolving it of cover, the more content they took it in. This was only another quizzical, and at once the founding quizzical. That itself bound up in it, the it of it, an aspect long announced, but never before more literal, never more dispositive, the insolence of so. So all proceeded apace within the box with no outside. Quantum and quotidian contested and took turns winning. Contest and a peril of time, time all disguise. Insofar as quotidian won, KD exiting the nets vied with the downing of Roe. Gas prices competed with war crimes in Ukraine. Insofar as quantum won, ungular connection erased punctual object or event. And there I was again, upheld by wood, overlooking water, wishing I knew. All indeed proceeded apace within the box with no outside. Quantum and quotidian contested and took turns winning, contest and a peril of time, time all disguise. Tabula what say? We had come a long way and we had come no way. We sat down at the end of the pier, on the end of the pier. Our legs dangled over the sides. Where water once hit above our ankles, no water wet our feet. The pier was made of rickety wood, our sitting on which made more rickety. We took pleasure in its creaking, we found. We were plotting work in relation to pain, an analog of signal to noise, but with pain as a form of work. It seemed something we'd have said had the wood not beat us to it. Something we went ahead and said, the wood having said it anyway. Thank you.
Waipunalauki aloha. My name is No'u Revilla. and I'm very happy to be here, and I will be sharing 2 poems from my book, Ask the Brindled. But before we do that, I'd like to open with fragments of an epistolary collaboration between myself and Jocelyn Ng, who is a queer Oiwi multidimensional artist based in Hawaii, and who also is responsible for the beautiful Wau'akua art on the cover of my book. Jocelyn is not only the artist of the cover art, but also the wahine who appears as the welcoming figure on the cover. So first of all, mahalo nui loa to Jocelyn Ng. And I'd like to start with this epistolary collaboration because it really, for me, brings you into the wet and thick of the book in a way that is deeply Oiwi, deeply femme, and deeply queer and collaborative. So, these are fragments from Letters to the Gut House, Collaboration and Decolonial Love in Hawaii. Dear Joss, I write to you because you dismantle binaries between sacred and obscene. In the materiality of your transformations, I meet wilder language for decolonial love. This is a love letter to collaboration, to the ways my body opens to your hands. The stories of my ancestors, of your ancestors, teach us how resistance innovates contact. These love notes I send to you throb from that we, which is ancestor affirming, sex positive, aloha aina, and mo'olelo fluid. In Hawaii, our decolonial narratives are many named and many bodied. Dear Joss, did you know I come from Wai'ehu? In English, the name of my childhood home means ocean spray. It feels like you knew that all along, aiming your spray gun at my feet to render me lizard. For scales, we used duct tape and fishnet stockings, special ordered greens and blacks. My extremities, you dusted in gold. Dear Joss, there are 8 directionals in our language. 8, like spiders. When I was young, my grandmother taught me about lizards and spiders, that we are lizards and we eat spiders in order to live. We eat them, girl. We eat them. Did she know even then how my hunger would touch other women? Did she prophesize the way you and I would touch each other in art and language? Before touching me again, you tell me you're teaching yourself how to make scars. What you meant was 3rd-degree silicone. What I heard was Cecilia Vicuña, and you were going to teach us all how to travel from wound to wounderment. In shapeshifting, we are vessel and anti-vessel simultaneously. On the one hand, a vessel can be a thing to pour with, an ancestral tool. On the other hand, as Hawaiians know, vessels can also be ships filled with syphilis and war. To be in transformation, then, is to awaken the 4, the 40, the 400, the 400,000 gods inside of you, to become more legend, to become more of your father's memory, more ancestors knocking at the door, more future reaching for you, more story unraveled. Dear Joss, do you remember when you opened my skin for the first time? I told you to put your hands on me like you're peeling my skin, I clarified. So you trained your fingernails on the in-between of the skin I was born with and the skin you sculpted along my shoulder. Like this, you asked. Or then lengthening your arms and kissing the floor with your knees, you turned your fingers into hooks. Like that. Suddenly, I was convinced somewhere my shapeshifter grandmother was talking to God. In the spirit of the epistolary form, the two poems that I will read from Ask the Brindled are direct address poems. And the first is a lifeline to other queer femmes in the thick of heartbreak. And it takes the form of a list poem. And it's called After She Leaves You, Femme. 1, you will be a hole in the ground, a crater without glory, without science. In the ground, you will forget we are the ones whose legs double as thunder. 2, tell me where it hurts. No one will say. Leave land, leave sleep, walk to the ocean like your grandmother did when grandpa died. She just kept walking, Auntie tells you. No slipper, not looking at anybody. 3, read Audre Lorde, Hamnani K. Trask, read Warriors every night. 4, pile our legs like Chiave. Let it be this skin, this form, if something has to burn. Red flags we cackled and cut into skirts. Maybe we are passage to the divine, and maybe we fuck ourselves in the shower and rub storm clouds alive. 5, wash your sheets. Don't wash your sheets. 6, in 7 days, she destroyed your world. For the next 7, eat with your fingers and trust only the moon. There will be pressure cooked pork. There will be gauze. 7, remember bare feet. Remember the smell of ocean. And the last poem I will read is dedicated to my sister, Kaimalie. It is a sestina entitled For Sisters Who Pray with Fire. I love the smell of gasoline. My sister loves fire. We keep memorizing her list of objects to burn, the hot, devotional theater of it all. No one will call it fragrance, this service station blood filling my head with firsts. The first stick shift I knuckled white, the first pack of cigarettes bought without my passing magic. My sister too didn't bleed, but smoked. In a world raised without her inflammatory hand, never called on or held, we teach ourselves devotion, what it smells like, looks like, devoting fire truck lungs, fought that first scratch of match, and still they call us emergency, us a garland of risk. So my gasoline goes everywhere. And her theater fills with blood. When I smell fire, she comes, blood-flecked and crackling, devoted to each stick snapping through her. First, we weren't bright enough, so first we burned the suburbs down. My sister's heart is a box of fuses. Call her a good burn. Call us sisters in smoke. Blood makes us radiant. Everywhere my veins good at breathing us devout, promising to love each other first. Come what sulfur, my benzene, her bic, come what may, burn just to wash her. My umbilical cord, her umbilical cord, buried together. You see, there is no first without daughters. We are pre-contact blood, less discovery, less devoted to the fire and brimstone. Bless my sister for the guzzling effects of her matchscape devotion. Forever calling my blood back, back to what came first. Mahalo nui loa.
Shemai, I'm delighted to be reading today from my latest collection, In the Current Where Drowning is Beautiful. Signs you are standing at the end. 2/3 of the country is in drought. The waters have all gone walking. Nunachachaluni. When white peaks crested the rolling hills behind our house, I knew it was time. We understand since we are children. Waves break waves, travel waves, do the wave. Did the wave make it across the room? Did the people who started it move across the room? Cause of death, traumatized. Cause of death, bad heart. Cause of death, exposure. I heard it was an accident. In the end, in the breakers, there was no boat when I heard it. I took my sisters and some others out the back door. The calm was not, and the neatly kept lawn was not. The sleeper wave was not. Too many teeth I saw too late. The wave would not be dove under. It turned snow, wet and heaving, and we were already running. After a field, I could hear every dead thing. How do we behave in the field? They asked for a story, the ones we'd have to leave behind, swallowed by the hoary mouth. Never ignore what someone tells you in a dream. Once the women said, you are trying to remember what someone said who is dead. Hulianwach ushikamkin, lampak huashu. In the field. They asked me if I was a citizen. They wanted to know what I had seen. I had heard this was only a test. Look at the mark and tell them what you see. Akarngashkangchu mech pilirluku, a woman said to me. They want more, she said. I gave her a tooth from my mouth to cut the skin stretched before her. She dug. With her mouth, she dug enough holes in the earth she divided with her work. She cut the skin even into pieces she divided in the earth. This is for your mouth. This is for your stomach. This is for your hand. This is for your rib. This is for your table. This is for sharing. This is for later. This is for the others. This is you. For each wound, a thread around my neck. I see a well, I said. I showed them my hands, clean under the nails and open, swallowed the dirt under my tongue. They let me walk away with the needle in my eye. They don't look you in the eyes, these men, these days. I walked away with a garden in my throat and seeds on my tongue. In the current where drowning is beautiful. White breaks first, waves green, then black, shining seas, ships sailing, not sailing. What is still, wanting wind? Used to be, no man could go against. This weather too will pass. The wind, not a river. And if a puddle at the last gives way to desert, corked bottle, walled city, veiled woman, buried one, were you afraid? Kahwach tuknyuk. If air the conscious element, sometimes breath, sometimes bird. The last few days have been windy, but the current is strong, Nikafor, and it rains all the time. Taminek tangak atur tapet. And sometimes, if I were not afraid, a fish with teeth after all. If a field. Very well. Crack open my ribs and crawl my chest. Make of me one you can live with. Only this too, how we behave in the field. I may stand here until I am down to waist, and I will not get used to that smile. Wide-eyed, because you've never seen the hole you laid down in. It rains, and we use the water in everything. Camouflage, defense, and predation being among the reasons. Fish are thought to emit their own light. Talk to your future daughter as though nothing is wrong. Or if you want her to be strong and able to adapt in ways that haven't been found out yet, tell her everything. Apologize if you think it will help, or don't. It will be too late. Unarmed boys and fathers, even mothers, even girls, will be dead. You were afraid. Someone you loved was afraid. Someone you would distance yourself from entirely was afraid. And that person who was afraid had too many arms. And the person they feared had none. See the shining sea. Tell her you are working on her birthday gift, as if this day will arrive. Tell her it will save her life. You still have time to figure it out. Not arms. There will be enough even if she is born without any. Not legs. There will be enough crossed and not enough dry land. How would you feel about an extra heart? My own, a hole into each of you I pour. The usual number of ribs to encase it, and no more. But it can hold more than it looks outside. This hole is where you can throw your own children, when you can no longer feed them, and their last tooth breaks on the rocks they were sucking, and the air above thins grows warm. The tundra begins to thaw. Hell breaks loose. A sports drink company has made the first man out of water, and isn't it a good time to be alive? One shines briefly, unless of course you are the water or the man. One dies soon. What if we skip to the end? I'll make you half fish and luminous. I sometimes feel with my mother we are nestled in the hand of God. Only God is female, and in her hand is a hole we must pass through to be caught, to feed the men again and again, to feed the women and the children and the men. And it's not personal, or it is, but the hand is thinking of closing. I think the hand is closing. After all, you can only throw a fish so many times before bad heart, before traumatized, before it looks like a world with a lot of dead women. Daughter, in this dream I stood before the water until mud. One by one, my teeth fell out and rolled into the sand, and my glowing bones parted ways, suggesting small boats, each a wave carried back to sea. Holes in the field. The women are not there. The girls are not there. What if the sea were a mouth, a neck opening? Imam tanga tar yutu'uk. Empty, full. Otherwise, imak. Otherwise, a liquid contained inside, contents rising. Take care, each point of stress. The word for the week is woman. Arnak peknar tu tartu. This is only a test. How closely are you listening? We must dive. Everywhere to wash my hands there was blood. Back bending, we dove, the words air in our throats. Without them, you are not a whole person, Yimok said to me at the grave. When I grew sick on cakes and sweetmeats, I left home. Rain in my gaping and memory of water turning my lungs. I broke down in the desert where border men held, fire broke. I stayed with the women I found, wanting to see a miracle. A wall turn water. What remained after a flood? Who could stand upright? Which fish could survive it? Which birds would return, branches in their clutch to light upon? And this will be my last poem, Koyana. If you're going to look like a wolf, they have to love you more than they fear you. The first deer had large teeth and no horns and were not afraid. The first deer did not have enough fear for the men who needed them to survive. A woman decided to let the men eat. A grandmother decided her deer shall have horns and be afraid. Someone's mother decided the men shall eat and be feared. A man thought wolves should be used to cull the herd. And we, who had been catching water dripping through stone in the homes we dug out of the earth, we licked our long teeth clean and set to work.
Thank you all to our writers who shared with us. I'm Kyrie, and I'm here to moderate our Q&A session. Thank you so much, Nathaniel Mackey, No'u Revilla, and Abigail Chabitnoy for joining us. Let's welcome you all back on stage. Nathaniel Mackey, No'u Revilla, and Abigail Chabitnoy. Hi, welcome. I want to make sure that you all get the chance to talk to each other and to our audience. So, audience, make sure you submit your questions in the Q&A, not the chat. This allows for everyone to vote on questions that they like and get answered. We'll try to get to as many as possible in the time that we have. To get us started, I'll ask each writer to say a few words about what got you started as a writer. Nathaniel, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I wanted to write when I was very young, in grade school, and I wrote stories and stuff, and was fascinated by my older sister's typewriter because it looked like the stuff I wrote had been printed and published. So I spent a lot of time on it, and it was always there. I wanted to do something. I drew and painted for a while, but I came back to writing in my teens and thinking about it as something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It took the place of other things I had, in the intervening period of time, I thought I might do. But I came back to writing and words.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathaniel. No, would you like to share?
Sure. First, Nathaniel and Abigail, mahalo nui loa. I'm sitting with your words, and I feel very fed. So mahalo for your generosity and your work. For me, I come from a family of beautiful storytellers. So, you know, my aunties could hula the ocean into a tuna can if they wanted to. My father is a fisherman, a welder, and he could tell the story about walking to the grocery store, but had everyone on the edge of their chairs because he can tell a story, he can tell a good joke. And you know, gossip in my family isn't this petty superficial thing. It's this: you're going to step into this ring, you better come with it, you better be quick, you better be witty, you better have the most updated information. So oral traditions is what raised me. And I'm a baby, and I'm watching my aunties dance hula. I'm watching my father just net everyone in with a story. My aunties, saying what's up. And I think I just had this desire of how can I write this music down. And Nathaniel and Abigail, the musicality of your poems and the way you read, I'm just so devoted to the music and wonder of language. So I gotta shout out my ohana, definitely.
Amazing. Thank you, No. Abigail, would you like to share?
I've been muted. Am I? Okay. Yes, likewise, just to echo No'u, this reading has just been so wonderful. And like Nathaniel, I really started writing young in grade school. Authorism is the first thing I remember telling my dad I wanted to study when I grew up. And I was always writing stories and writing notes down. And I used to talk a lot as a kid to strangers. I would just talk their ear off about anything. I would hold up the line at a store telling the cashier that I was collecting rocks, and that's why I was buying these rocks from a museum. It didn't matter how long the line was. And my family didn't really tell stories, actually, and I think it was this, but we always had books around. My dad, if we were playing in a sports game and we weren't actively in the game, his head was in the book, in the bleachers. His power of concentration is just unparalleled. And so we didn't tell stories in our family, really. And I kind of at a certain point got conditioned to not talk the ear off of everyone I met. But written word kind of became where I went with that desire for story and that interest. And I thought I was going to write fiction actually, but like no, I was really more drawn to language, and so my fiction stories didn't really have plot or dialogue or character development or any of those things that people looking for a traditional story wanted. But I love the web of patterns, the webs and threads that connect stories, and just even in this reading that none of us could have prepared, right? We did this pre-recorded, and even in our responses, just seeing these webs of connection, these tendrils, that's always what's kind of kept drawing me on. And so an early love and a few great mentors that helped push me along.
Great. Thank you. I love that concept of webs of connection. I think that's something we'll all really appreciate. All right. Brandy asks, there's so much musicality in every poem you read today. Please share a little of how you craft with a sense of sound and rhythm in mind. Oh, sorry. Nathaniel, would you like to start us off?
Well, it's listening to the musicality of language itself, um, which I think gets instilled in us at a pretty early age. We hear this buzzing around us as infants and as toddlers that we don't understand yet. The semantic part of it, we're not getting. But the music is reaching us, the rhythms, the intonation, all of that. And I think that's a kind of base that we work from, if we let ourselves. I think that so much damage has been done to that by the age of reason that it does take some work to believe that it's a valid vein of inquiry to be following. But it definitely directs my work, and has a lot to do with the fact that I'm such a big fan of music, especially instrumental music, and the sense you get in instrumental music, wordless music, that something is being said, some attempt to declaim or to articulate is being done with these instruments that don't have language in the semantic sense, in the sense that denotative messages are sent. And a large part of what I've been immersed in over the years is that sense that the musicality itself signifies. So, one pays attention to the things that set poetry apart from so-called prose, so-called poetry. In our earliest introduction to it, rhymes, which is a sonic event, two words or two syllables sounding alike. And we have other kinds of like-sounding sounds in alliteration and assonance that were the marks of poetry. And taking those traditional features of poetry and being attentive to them is certainly central to the lyricism of so-called musical writing, musical poetry. Rhythm is very important. The sense of rhythm that one gets, again, in language that one can maybe hear at a distance, somebody speaking, and you can get a sense of the mood without hearing the words clearly by the rhythms of the utterance. So for me, being attentive to rhythm, trying to change it up sometimes, and being attentive to syntax, as one of the important vehicles of that change up over the years. It has been, a part of what catches my attention and leads me to work in certain ways. But, that's that's a vast subject that you just opened up, and you really don't want to get me started on it. So I'm gonna stop here and let one of the other readers take over.
Thank you, Nathaniel. No'u, would you like to share?
I'm like, Nathaniel, please keep going. Because we can talk about this all day and with enthusiasm and aloha, right? I think, there was a moment in Nathaniel's reading, the alliteration just hit me. Quantum and quotidian contested, and that hard crack. And then Abigail has that anaphora of this is for, this is for, this is for. So it's not only the single unit of a letter in a word, but it's the phrase, it's the line. And I'm indigenous, so repetition is like what I wrap my body around on a daily. Repetition is my day one. Repetition is my compass. And two things I'm thinking about that I tell my students. One, I can't teach you how to be hungry. You have to come here hungry for language. You have to come here hungry when you hear something beautiful or you hear quantum and quotidian contested. You better turn around and be like, what just happened? I can't teach you how to be hungry. And then second, we as poets, as writers, we have to malama our readers. And in my language, malama means to care. And how are you caring for your readers? And one way to do that is with sound. And are you using sound to contrast with the content, or using sound to envelop your readers and envelop the logic or the image? And I'm just feeling so blessed because this gathering today, Nathaniel and Abigail, you just malama with your work. And when you hear a poet and they come hungry and they know how to feed themselves and feed other people through language, what a gift. So mahalo nui loa.
Thank you. Abigail?
Yes, what to add? I always love these events. I feel like I'm back in class and I love that feeling. But something Nathaniel said that really struck out to me was the damage to sound in the age of reason. And I think that's something that really, for me, sound is, I write very much out of images, out of phrases, and out of a kind of, I don't know, I suppose more rational logic is often where I begin. And I use sound to kind of whittle away until I start to hear the language differently, until I start to hear the connection to words, the connection to sounds, until I start to hear these places of slippage where maybe it's not what I'm saying exactly, but it echoes something else, and how to let that simultaneity on the page through the sounds that I'm using as well. And so that's often where I'll start to let go of a little bit of the kind of clarity of communication and meaning that when I first started was so important to me, right? This idea of language is, this tool of communication. It's very utilitarian, and in the editing and the revising, and the more I speak aloud, the more I read the work aloud, is where I really start to let go of that of those kind of hard lines, and let language be more fluid and lead me elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you all for your insight into lyricism and sound. Tom says, you all seem to be writing lyric in the context of history. Is this your intention? Nathaniel?
Whether it's by intention or not, that's what I'm doing, and I'm not sure that one could not do it, or I could not do it. That the three of us could not do it. I mean, I hear what the questioner is getting at. I hear it in my, it's definitely in my work, and I heard it in all the work that was read today. I think that I don't know, the sense, um, I just get a sense of a kind of immense and thoroughgoing devastation that we're all subject to, and a will to persist in the face of that devastation. And the harmonies afforded by writing are among the ways that we find the strength and the will to persist. I mean, it necessarily carries an acknowledgement of history, but with that acknowledgement, we refuse to be beaten down by history. We refuse to agree that there is only one conception of history. We certainly don't want history confined to the Eurocentric age of reason's notions of history, which relegated, the heritages that we all come from to the outside, to this realm of no history, non-history. I mean, we are descendants of, the people that folks in Europe like Hegel called people without a history. So the very concept of history that has reigned is one that is shot through from its very roots with annihilation, othering, and devastation for us. And we inherit the task of picking that up and critically attending to it. And not just critically in an analytic sense, which we also use with all the tools of reason and rationality, but critical in a lyric sense. Again, the importance of sound, or the importance of repetition, which from a certain point of view could be seen as wasteful and inefficient. But with its rhythmic qualities and the kinds of springing that can give us, we find a way of contesting limiting and limited senses of history that lend themselves to the very devastation that we find flowing in history, not just in the past, but in the very present, the sense of the historical, the sense of what is historical about our times. And you look at, if you look at that, what is historical about our times, more often than not, it's catastrophic. I find myself more recently writing with the sense of these installments of Song of the Andumbulu, or Mu, as time capsules. They usually get written over the course of a number of days, and things that are happening, things that are in the air, happenstantial things. I mean, in the installment that I read when I was writing it, Roe v. Wade had just been voted down by the Supreme Court. So that comes into the poem. Although the poem is not about it. The poem is flowing in this historical stream that it gets part of its flow and energy from, but against which it wants to contend as well. So again, this sense of history as burden and weight, but lyric as something that lightens or seeks to lighten, that burden, that weight. in an African American tradition, the work song, where where in prison labor especially, a special kind of music evolved that came out of the dehumanizing work done by convict labor, where the song was a way of easing the weight of that labor. And something of what we're doing, I feel, is in that same vein. We don't just, we are in history. That's inescapable. And we have to somehow do what the West African god Legba does. He turns damage into a dance. And that's all the history I know.
Yeah, I guess one of the reasons I asked the question was precisely that, and it leads in a way into my other question, which was about the kind of epic form that you're using for this very large poem. That your answer, which is a kind of a capacious view of global history, kind of answers why you feel the necessity for that form. It seems to me as well. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yeah. It's almost like there's too much to say, or there's too much happening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Nathaniel. All right. No'u, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, we're just, me and Abigail just in the chat, like, oh my goodness. We could just be here forever with you, Nathaniel. One thing that, all the things that Nathaniel said, but the will to persist, I think for me as a Indigenous woman, a Hawaiian woman, a queer woman of color, the lyric, inside the lyric is the audacity to stay inside an image, to stay with a feeling, to orbit, to dig deep. And so, as an Indigenous woman, the lyric stays. And how, this is a practical question. How do Indigenous poets, how does what we do help us stand stronger on our land? How does what we write help us stand stronger for our waters when we are constantly struggling against erasure, against being literally pushed off our lands, against the poisoning of our waters here at Red Hill? How do we stand? How do we cultivate that audacity to stay? And perhaps that's why I gravitate to the lyric mode, because of that. I'm going to stay, I'm going to onipa'a in my language, which was the motto of our last reigning queen, Lili'uokalani, who was illegally overthrown by the American military in 1893. Onipa'a, I'm going to stay. And the lyric, just, I think the way poetry is, it slows you down. It slows you down. It tells you, stay here, stay here. Listen better and listen longer. That's not an answer whatsoever. It's more of a gut response, but I appreciate the question. Thank you.
I think that is an answer. That's a great answer from my view. I mean, part of my question was also about the lyric half of the question, as well as the historical half of the question. And for instance, Abigail, when you write about fishing, that's so personal, right? It's a person and a fish, and the essence of lyric. At the same time that it's within history.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. And Abigail, would you like to speak on lyricism?
Yeah, this combination of lyricism and history. I had a student who put it beautifully in their portfolio this last semester, speaking of all of that devastation this feeling of everything about now is so catastrophic, and poetry is sort of this will and insistence on singing despite all of that devastation, all that ruin, all that pain. It is that insistence that yes, there will still be singing, and trying to find beauty. And for me also, as a way of maintaining connections and rebuilding connections. I live in displacement from my homelands, my home waters, and poetry for me is also a way of speaking back to my ancestors, a way of pushing me to learn my language and reclaim my language and find space in the day for my language, even when there aren't others around that I can speak to. And so this kind of confrontation with history is sort of unavoidable. And it's also my attempt to use poetry, to be responsible, and to hold myself accountable, to not be escaping, but to really fully be present and engaged with this current moment, however challenging it might prove to be. It's poetry is really just how I attempt to be present, how I attempt to give back, how I attempt to hold myself accountable for the space that I am also occupying.
Great. Thank you so much, Abigail. And thank you so much all for your words and your insight and advice for writers. Unfortunately, we have to conclude our time together. So I'd like to thank No'u Revilla, Abigail Chabitnoy, and Nathaniel Mackey for joining us today. I hope you all got something out of our session this evening. And if you wouldn't mind donating to our 100% free event, we'd so appreciate it. I hope to see you all at the next session. Thank you so much again. Take care.
That was